You're all about to get the notification that I'm recording, but we do want to record today's session for those who are not able to be here. So welcome everybody, officially and formally. I am Molly Basham. I am the Early Learning Mathematics Specialist at USBE. And I have Krista Hoteling here, who's one of our K-3 literacy specialists. We also have Denise joining us today. She's a new K-3 literacy specialist, and Trish may be joining us a little bit later. I don't think she's on the call right now. As I mentioned before, we do have in the chat, and we will continue dropping it in as people continue to join, a link to today's Nearpod that you can engage with as we're going through the session, a Google form for you to sign in to make sure you receive credit for being here today, and a link to our Google folder where you can find all the resources and documents from today's presentation, including a Google slideshow of the slides that we're sharing. We are going to do the best we can to attend to the chat between the three of us. If one of us is presenting and you send us direct messages and we don't necessarily see them, we will try to go back and check them. But if we are going and get on a roll and you need to come off mute to interrupt us to ask a question, please feel free to do so. Oh, Trish is here. Hi, Trish. 2 meetings at once. It's always a lovely morning. But if you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to come off mute. If there is something that you put in the chat that we did not get a chance to see, we will do our best to attend to that. But with currently 95 of you on Zoom, and we know we have several rooms full of people, we want to make sure that all of your questions and queries get answered. So as I said, I am Molly Basham. I am the Early Learning Mathematics Specialist, and I will let my team members who are here today introduce themselves real quick.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Krista Hoteling, and I am one of the K-3 literacy specialists with the Utah State Board of Education. Happy to be here with all of you. Our one teammate, Christine, is unable to be here with us today, but she's also a K-3 literacy specialist. And then, as Molly mentioned, Denise is our newest K-3 literacy specialist. Many of you know that Julie Clark has moved into our early literacy coordinator position. And so Denise graciously moved into Julie's spot so we can keep our 3 K-3 literacy specialists at USBE to support all of you. And I don't know, Denise, if you wanted to say anything else or if you are good with me just introducing you.
That was great, Krista. Just happy to be here today.
Okay. And then I don't know if Trish is available to say anything, but as Molly said, Trish is here as well as one of our math specialists this morning.
Apologies, trying to respond to chats as they come through. For folks who are in rooms, I've gotten a couple of questions about people who are having difficulties with the sign-in links or difficulty getting registered on Midas. If you are all in a room together, Google tends to limit one person signing in on a Google form per device. So if you share the link that we dropped in the chat with your teammates, they should be able to sign in just on a different device, whether that's on their phone or on a different computer. And if you have folks who are attending today who were not able to register in Midas, if you could please email charla.lucero@schools.utah.gov. Denise or Krista, can you put her email in the chat? We know that Midas is closed, but she can help you get registered to make sure that you do get credit for attending if you weren't able to register ahead of time. All right, and real quick, we have a packed morning, so I hope you all are ready to engage in some cognitively rigorous work, but we are going to try to get you out by lunchtime today rather than making this a full day training as we've done in the past. So we're going to start our morning. We are just wrapping up our welcome. Krista's going to provide a little overview of the early learning plan and talk to you about the early literacy components on the plan. I'm going to talk to you about the early mathematics components and how to address your goals. We will take a short break. We'll come back and Krista will talk about the professional learning grant. We'll talk about how to submit your early learning plan and what the system of support entails. We'll have another short break. We'll share some quick information about training opportunities that are coming up, some reminders and resources. And then our goal is to give you the last hour of our meeting together so that you can have some team time so that your team can have a chance to sit down, whether you are in person together, or we will open some breakout rooms if your team wants to collaborate that way, so that you can actually take this time to get started on your plan while we are here, and we can either pop into a breakout room or answer your questions either synchronously or through the chat. And we also tried to time that around lunch so that if your team has future time scheduled for completing your plan, if you all want to just go out and have lunch together a little bit early, you are welcome to do so at that point as well. So without further ado, I'm going to let you take just a moment to read through our learning intentions and success criteria for today. I'm not going to read that to you because you will hear a lot of my voice and you are all adults, so I will mute myself for a moment while you get a chance to read that. All right, and hopefully you all are able to walk away today feeling like you have met those success criteria, feeling prepared to submit your early learning plan and your professional learning grant applications. I am going to pass the mic over to Krista, and she is going to give you a quick overview of what the early learning plan entails.
Okay, thank you, Molly. All right, so many of you know that there are some things that are changing this year with the early learning plan. So part of this overview is to just go over some of those changes. Some things are still the same. So to begin with, the purpose of early learning, still the same, to establish an early learning plan that includes early literacy and early mathematics. The early literacy part is not as great as it has been in the past. And we'll go over that here in a little bit, just because of some changes to the code that we'll talk about. But as we said, there will still be an early literacy component. There'll still be your early mathematics, and then you will still have goals. It is required one of those goals be a math goal. The second one is LEA choice. You can do another math goal, or you can choose to do a literacy goal. So the changes that have happened stemmed from the passing of SB 2 during our legislative session. And what that did is it ended up repealing our early literacy code. So the funds that used to come from early literacy are now being rolled up into every LEA's at-risk WPU. So all that money that normally you put into to apply for in Utah grants, it is automatically going to LEAs as part of your at-risk WPU funds. So as I said, the SB 2 bill repealed our 53F-2-503, which was the early literacy program, and that is effective July 2024. So in a couple of weeks, there is no longer an early literacy program grant for LEAs. And so also what that repeal did is it impacted one of our other codes, which is 53G7-218, which had to do with the plan. And with the repeal of early literacy in the plan, it took out a lot of the things that we have included before for early literacy, as far as looking at what strategies were being used, and that first literacy goal. In the past, there were 3 goals. Now we only have 2 because it took out that first literacy goal. So when we look at the plan here in a little bit, you'll see that the early literacy section is just asking for your curriculum that you're using in Tier 1 and for your interventions. And the reason that is still on the plan is because we have SB 127, which states that LEAs have to have that evidence-informed core curriculum and evidence-based intervention curriculum. So this is a way that the board decided we could get that information from the LEAs in a quick and easy way without having to fill out anything else. So that's still on the plan. And then you'll still have that choice of a literacy goal. And then there is a little bit change with the assurances that we will show you. Everything is still due September 1st by 5 p.m. A little bit later, Molly will go through what the submission will look like, because it is different this year because there is no submission into Utah grants for your early learning plan this year. So we'll go over that a little bit later, but just so you know what's coming up. And then some things to remember that when you're thinking about your plan, setting those goals, all those other pieces of it, that unless an LEA has 95 to 100% of their students in K through 3 scoring in the above benchmark category and making typical or better progress, then the plan should change each year to continue to improve teacher expertise, classroom instruction, and our student outcomes. And just as another little reminder, all elementary LEAs are required by code to submit an early learning plan and take it to their local board for approval. So that local board approval of your plan is still in the second code that kept part of the plan together there. So that will still be a requirement. And like I said, Molly will go over all of that later of how that will work for our LEAs this year. So now looking at the plan, so Molly or Denise, if you will drop the link to the template for the plan and also the look fors into the chat box. We'll go over what the beginning part looks like, and then Molly will go into math with you. So we'll just kind of take a quick look at what the literacy section looks like and the change to the assurances at the end that pertain to literacy. Soon as Nearpod catches up with me. Okay, so this is section A, and this is the literacy section, and this is all that you'll see. So it's just to list your evidence-informed core curriculum programs and evidence-based intervention programs for grades K through 3 literacy, along with the year published or edition. So as you are filling this out, make sure you're checking for what some of them are just editions, some of them are the year published. We need to know that information based off of the reviews that the committee has done. Everything is based off of those years or editions as far as the approval of those reviews from our review committee. So this is the only literacy part that you really have to complete, and let us know what you're using and for your core program, intervention, and the year published or the edition. In the intervention, you can let us know also of strategies that you're using for those tier 2 and tier 3 interventions. As in the past, it does, it can be strategies and or the curriculum that you're being used. So please know that you can add those strategies with the piece there. Okay, and then the next change would be with the assurances. So that second assurance has to do with the curriculum, as I said, with the passing of SB 127 a couple years ago, that our LEAs needed to have that in curriculum for tier 1 and their intervention. So it just says that the LEA has adopted high quality instructional materials and intervention programs aligned with the effective research regarding the science of reading, and the LEA's reading strategies meet the criteria in section 53G-11-303. And this was also decided by our board of how to check in with our LEAs about that piece from SB 127. So that is really the literacy part of your plan for this year. So I am going to pass it back. I'll check. Are there any questions? I know many of you have heard this quite a few times. We have shared this about the literacy changing in our LD meetings. And I know that it has been talked about in other meetings as well. So, but just wanted to check to see if there were any questions. All right, I will pass it over to Molly and she'll go into math.
Thanks, Krista. And before I go ahead and get started, I'm just going to drop several links into the chat that I may reference during the presentation, I may not, but the first link is an early mathematics resource document, which I will talk a little bit about in the presentation. And then there's 3 other documents. One is our pre-K through 12 mathematics framework. One is our pre-K through 12 mathematics vision, and the other is a USB document about interventions in high quality mathematics instruction. So I just wanted to share all of those with you. They are also all linked in the Google folder, so you do have access to those resources. later on, but they might be helpful as you're completing your plan, as you're making additional plans around the math instruction in your LEA. Those are just great resources to look at moving forward. So the early mathematics portion of the plan really has not changed much from the past 2 years. So for those who have already completed early learning plans in the past, this should look very familiar. For those of you who are new, I will try to explain the components of the math plan. So question 1 on section B, which is the math portion of the early learning plan, looks very similar to question 1 on the literacy side, where it will ask you what evidence-based curriculum is being used in Tier 1 instruction and what intervention instruction is being used for K3 mathematics. So for this section, you just need to list your Tier 1 math program. If you have a supplement like iReady or Imagine Learning and you want to list it there as well, you can. And then on the right-hand column of that chart, list any intervention programs you're using. We know and recognize that not every LEA has an intervention curriculum for math. If you don't have an intervention curriculum and you are just using evidence-based strategies, you can list those there as well. So that section is pretty straightforward. It's question 2 on the math plan that we're going to spend a little bit more time on. Question 2 asks you to describe how the following mathematical components are incorporated in Tier 1 instruction for grades K through 3. This question is required from statute and board rule, so we'll go into a little bit more detail about what these mean. But the 4 components that you must address are how your Tier 1 instruction, how your curriculum and the pedagogy that your teachers use addresses conceptual understanding, procedural fluency, strategic and adaptive mathematical thinking, and productive disposition. And for those who are in the Nearpod, there is a link on this slide to that early mathematics resource document that was also in the links that I just shared in the chat. It is the first link. That document is going to be really helpful if you're filling out this section and you have not done so before. It has a wealth of resources aligned to each of those 4 components. It has articles and websites and documents that you can look at to learn a little bit more. And I'm going to talk over the next couple of slides about what each of those 4 components mean. One thing that I do want to bring up in this section, our Look Fors document is meant to be a guide with examples. We cannot accept your plan if all you do is copy and paste from the Look Fors. We do need at least a little bit of unique detail about how your LEA is implementing those components. So just a bug to put in your ear. Use the Look Fors as a resource, but this is not a place where you can just copy and paste what's in the Look Fors document. We do need at least a little bit of personalized information about what's happening in your LEA. One thing I do recommend, however, is I know most of our LEAs who are here who have submitted these plans before. We do have at least one brand new LEA this year. If you have submitted your early learning plan before, I highly suggest for this question 2 on the math component, you look back at your plans from previous years and do a little bit of reflection. What have you been implementing that has worked? What have you been implementing that may need to be changed moving forward? If you put together a plan of strong core strategies for your Tier 1 instruction and they are working and you want to copy and paste those from last year's plan that was approved, and those are things you're going to continue to implement in your LEA, I highly recommend you doing so. So going a little bit more in depth for those who are new to writing these plans, the first component that you need to address is conceptual understanding. Conceptual understanding is defined in board rule as the comprehension and connection of concepts, operations, and relations. It establishes foundational schema that are necessary for students to develop procedural fluency. So for those of us who live and breathe math like I do, conceptual understanding is really our bread and butter. We want our students to have a really sound, strong understanding of the mathematical concepts that they are learning. We want them to be able to connect different representations, to connect them for mathematical operations that they're engaging with in elementary school, and to look for relationships and patterns among numbers. So having that incorporated and addressing how you incorporate that in your plan is going to help you in your curriculum and in your instruction is going to help you answer that first component of this question on your plan. And that conceptual understanding connects very strongly with the next component, which is procedural fluency. Procedural fluency is defined as the meaningful, flexible, accurate, and efficient use of procedures to solve problems. I say it every year. I use the same image every year for lit training. I love the image on this slide because I think it really gives us a great visual representation of what we mean when we talk about procedural fluency. It is not just about students being fast. It's about them having that meaningful, flexible, and accurate understanding of their mathematical operations to help them become more efficient as they solve problems. And so this image is a great representation of what we mean by that. It has multiplication operations addressed in different ways, both as expressions, as models, as diagrams, as a real life image with the dice, really getting at what we're looking for when we talk about instruction on procedural fluency. One quick note, best practice in mathematics is that students will not learn procedural fluency strictly through time testing and memorization. So if your plan does just say we will do time tests every week, we will not be able to approve that on your plan. Building procedural fluency comes through things like number talks, through meaningful activities that engage students in games to practice their facts, not through just repeated time tests like many of us had when we were children. The next component that you need to address is strategic and adaptive mathematical thinking. This is defined as the ability to formulate, represent, and solve mathematical problems with the capacity to justify the logic used to arrive at the solution. And I include an image of our standards for mathematical practice. These are the first 8 standards for math in every grade, K through 12, in our Utah Core Mathematics Standards right now. And they are really the meat and potatoes of what we want our students to be able to do with mathematics. The remaining content standards after those 8 are really the vehicle through which students are able to engage in these practices, and they really get at that strategic and adaptive mathematical thinking. So we want to know, how does your core instruction, your tier 1 instruction, help students attend to that kind of thinking and those practices on a day-to-day basis? And then the last component that you need to address in your plan is how your core instruction helps students build a productive disposition, which is defined as the ability to see mathematics as useful and worthwhile while exercising a steady effort to learn mathematics. This is where we get at kind of that social emotional side of mathematics, helping students attend to a growth mindset, helping them develop perseverance. What components are your teachers implementing in their math classrooms to help build that in their learners? Okay, I'm going to pause because that wraps up the math specific portion of the plan, and I'm going to dive into goals in just a minute. So I want to give everyone a chance. Does anyone have questions about those 2 math specific questions before I move on? All right, trying to provide adequate wait time in a virtual space always feels a little bit awkward, but if you have any questions, feel free to drop those in the chat or come off mute. We are ahead of schedule right now, which is fabulous, but moving into our goals section, I will say last week when we had our first lit training, the goals section was where we got a little bit behind because people had a lot of questions. So I'm going to ask you to buckle up, put on your thinking caps. I'm going to put a lot of information at you over the next 30 or so minutes. And I apologize, it's going to be a lot of direct instruction time. You are going to hear me talking quite a bit. But hopefully after this next component of our presentation, as we're going into our next break, you will feel very confident about how to take the data that you have analyzed and use it to help you write the goals to support your plan.
Molly,
Yes.
before we go to goals, I forgot that we did not show how to download the plan so that they are able to. So I'll do that real quick.
Sounds
Because
great, Krista.
I just realized, I was like, oh, we never showed that. So let me bring the plan up and move it on the share screen here, and hopefully everybody can see it. In order for you to be able to complete the plan, you need to download it onto your desktop. And it needs to be submitted as a Word document. And so that we can make comments back and forth. And also, the email that it goes to, our shared inbox, does not have an associated Google account. So if it is sent as a Google link or something like that, we can't access it. So it doesn't have a Google account link to it. So that's why it still has to be a Word document. So when you once you open the link, if you just come over here to File and down here to Download, and you can click Microsoft Word and it will download it to your desktop, and then you can start editing it. So we just want to make sure go over those directions. It's a little bit of a process, and so we want to just make sure everybody knows that, and so that you're able to edit the document once you download it onto your desktop as a Microsoft Word document. So that is to be able to put your information into the plan. And now I'll pass it back over to Molly to talk about goals.
Krista, do you want to touch on real quick? I know we both kind of referenced it, but also the purpose of the look fors document.
Oh, yes. Let me bring that up real quick. So the look fors has been put together to help you see the information of what could go on your plan. And so what's in green is what the LEAs would complete. So up at the top, just the general information, the name of your district or charter, and then your expected board meeting date, so that we can make sure that we get it back to you in a timely manner before your board meeting. And then down throughout the whole plan, you'll see that we have provided just some little tidbits to help you in completing the plan. So we always suggest that you have your plan that you're filling up on your screen, and then have that look fors right next to it. And so that you can make sure that, oh, I need to, it's asking for this kind of information. You can see the example, but then make sure that what you're putting into your plan fits for what is happening in your LEA. And so you can just put them side by side, look at the examples, the information, and then also you can go through and like check off, like, oh, this said I had to check the boxes below. I've done that. So we just put it together to help you, to help follow along as you're completing your plan. Okay, I'll check real quick. Any questions about the plan, template, the look fors? All right, Molly, go on to goals.
Right, here we go. So for the 2024-2025 plan, that still sounds like a futuristic date to me. But for your plans this year, you will be looking to achieve 3 goals. The first goal is not specifically written onto your plan, but that is the state growth goal for mathematics. It is continuing to be the same as it has been for the last 3 years. The state growth goal for mathematics requires 60% of 1st through 3rd grade students to make typical or better progress as measured on Pathways of Progress in Acadience Math from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. So the literacy state growth goal is no more because of the passing of SB2, but the state math growth goal does remain the same, with that target of 60% of students in 1st through 3rd grade making typical or better progress. The other 2 goals, as Krista mentioned before, are your local goals that you will be setting on your plan. One of those local goals, the first one, must be set for math. The second local goal is your choice. You can set that for either literacy or math. So if you want to choose to have your goals be entirely math focused this year, you can. If you would rather set one for math and one for literacy, that is up to you. Something to also keep in mind is that there is still the requirement to meet at least one of those local goals. And we know that many LEAs have a lot of time and a lot of energy invested in the early literacy space over the last few years with letters training and literacy coaches and all of these things. So if you know in your LEA, it's going to be more attainable for you to meet a literacy goal, please do continue setting one literacy goal, because for the system of support, it still is just one goal. One local goal must be met. It does not matter if it is the literacy goal or the math goal, or if you do 2 math goals. So I'm going to talk a little bit more over the next few minutes about how we go about using our data to set those goals. Per the requirements in State Code 53G-7, 218, these goals must be measurable. They must address current performance gaps in student data, and they must include specific strategies for improving outcomes. So in just a moment, I'm going to share with you our goal setting framework that will help you make sure that your goals address each of those. We do have a whole sentence structure that you can use. And I see in the chat, Melissa is asking, is there a way to set pathways in math? There is, Melissa. Both ADM and ALO have a way for teachers to set pathways. We're not going to go through that today, but if you would like, we can set up a meeting sometime after this training and I can walk you through how to do that. Our assessment department, we will share their emails later on in the day, can also help you know how to do that for math as well as it's been done for literacy in the past. So as we go into the goal setting process, this is going to be where that pre-work, the homework that we sent out to you ahead of time for your data analysis is going to come in handy. I am going to use those or reference those documents with some hypothetical data as I walk through how we will set these goals. The process for looking at your data in both math and in literacy are very, very similar. So as the math specialist, I'm going to talk specifically about this hypothetical math data, but know that as I'm walking through this, looking at your literacy data, the process that you would take is exactly the same. We just don't want to make you sit through us explaining how to set your goals twice for both math and literacy. So having these documents in front of you will be helpful. And if by chance you did not get those ahead of time, if you were not the person in your LEA who registered for Lit Training in Midas, I am going to drop those links into the chat as well so that everybody has them. And we are going to start off looking at the first portion of that document. And I know we got a couple questions. We did, because of the changes that many LEAs are seeing as they transition to using ALO as their system, since that is the only system available for literacy, we did tweak these documents a little bit so that our questions are just on one document rather than on two as it's been in the past. So we're going to look at the first portion of that first, where it asks about your longitudinal composite data. And as we're looking at that, the question that we want to ask ourselves is our core instruction effective? And effective is defined as at least 80% of students meeting grade level benchmark from core instruction alone. And we know that for some LEAs, that is still an ambitious goal, but 80% of our students meeting benchmark from tier 1 instruction is the target that we want to be shooting for. So looking at my hypothetical LEA data for this question, the first thing I notice when I look at this data is I look in that far right third grade column, and I notice that since I have 3 years of longitudinal data on my data worksheet, in year 1, third grade was meeting that goal of 80% of students making benchmark from core instruction alone. So that is fabulous. And when I look at years 2 and year 3, their scores, those next 2 subsequent cohorts of third graders, their scores weren't quite as high, but in year 2, I see that they came really, really close at middle of the year with 79% of those students meeting benchmark. And in year 3, at end of the year, they had 79% of those students meeting benchmark. So they are very, very close. Whatever's happening in my hypothetical LEA in third grade, it is working. Those students are achieving, for the most part, achieving benchmark almost to that 80%. So that probably wouldn't be the grade level that I would want to focus my goal on unless all of my other grade levels were meeting that 80%. And looking at this data, we can see that that is not the case. So as I proceeded to analyze this a little bit, I look at those other grade levels and I noticed that in year 1, kindergarten, first grade, and second grade all started the year with more students, a higher percentage of students meeting benchmark at the beginning of the year than who met the benchmark at end of the year. But as I look at the subsequent years, I see that some of the grade levels were having more effective instruction at changing that decrease than others. So in year 2 and year 3, if I look at first grade, they didn't quite make that 80% goal, but in year 2 and year 3, if you look at those blue circles, they were able to significantly increase from their beginning of the year percentage of students making benchmark to the end of the year. So second grade, while they're not quite at that 80% yet, they are showing consistent improvement in year 2 and year 3 from BOY to EOY. So again, it's an area I could choose to focus on if my other grade levels were all consistently making growth as well, since they're not quite at 80%. But since not all of my other grade levels are showing that same consistency and growth, first grade probably would also not be the area that I would want to target with my goal. If I look at kindergarten and second grade in year 2 and year 3, their percentage of students making benchmark or better are still decreasing from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. So those two grade levels would be areas where I would want to definitely look at what's happening in my tier 1 core instruction to see why we have across 3 years, the percentage of students making benchmark consistently decreasing from beginning of the year to end of the year. So just looking at that first question, I know I'm probably going to want to target my goal at either kindergarten or second grade. And I'm going to use the remaining questions on my data sheet to help me dive in a little deeper to see potentially where those gaps may be. I could use this question alone to set a composite goal. However, setting a composite goal isn't necessarily going to be quite as targeted as it would be if I dive into the submeasures. So I am going to show how we would complete that deep dive looking at the kindergarten submeasures specifically, which is the next question on my sheet. When you are analyzing your data for your LEA, I do recommend looking at those submeasures across each grade level, especially if in the case of this hypothetical example, you had multiple grade levels that were consistently seeing that dip from beginning of the year to having a lower percentage of students meeting benchmark at the end of the year. So if you look on our shared screen right now, or if you look in the Nearpod, I have those kindergarten submeasures pulled up right now, and I would look at that grade level at each of my submeasures. And if we look at this, we know kindergarten was dipping from beginning of the year to end of the year, kind of across the board. But when I look, I see that beginning quantity discrimination, BQD, that first submeasure, in year 1, they did still dip from beginning of the year to end of the year in their beginning quantity discrimination percentage of students making benchmark. But in year 2 and year 3, it seems like the teachers did make some kind of tweak on how they were teaching that magnitude comparison and subitization. Those are the skills assessed in beginning quantity discrimination. So that's probably not going to be the area that I want to focus my goal, because we are seeing improvements from year 1 to year 2 to year 3. However, as I move forward, if I look at those scores, those longitudinal scores in number identification fluency and next number fluency, this is where I see that across the board, almost across the board, those scores are either staying kind of stagnant in next number fluency or dipping from beginning of the year to end of the year with number identification fluency. And looking at this, when we're looking at our submeasures, an important question to ask yourself is, which of these submeasures assesses the most foundational skill? So in the case of looking at next number fluency and number identification fluency, I would likely choose to set my goal based on number identification fluency, because that is a more foundational skill than the next number fluency. Students' ability to look at a number and recognize it and name it is going to actually help them be able to achieve a higher score on next number fluency. So I'd probably choose to target number identification fluency skills within my goals. And as we move forward and look at that language frame that I mentioned and how we set the 2 different kinds of goals that you can set for your plan this year, we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like. I'm going to pause for just a moment. Any questions on how we would look at that data? I'm going to provide a little bit more information on this as we move forward and talk about what the goal structure looks like. All right, wanted to give it time if anyone wanted to come on mute and ask. So as mentioned, we do have a language frame to help you as you're setting goals. And being the former elementary teachers that we all are, of course, it is color-coded for you to make it as easy as possible. We have many LEAs who submit their plans with their goals color-coded still in the plan, which always makes us smile. But to address all of the components that are required in statute, this language frame will help you do that. So what we have, if you look in the gray box, it says by date, then you will put who is responsible, will, what you will change, by, which addresses the how you will change it, and to address the why. So the red, for most LEAs, what you will put in the red is the date of your last day of school. So if that's May, I don't have next year's calendar in front of me, but if that's May 30th, if that's June 5th, 2025, you will put the date of your last day of school, most likely, will be the date that you put in there. The only exception might be, I know for literacy, and I cannot remember which submeasure off the top of my head, there is at least one submeasure that is only from BOI to MOI. Krista's saying, no, you'd still put the end of the year.
It's MOI, usually they're MOI to EOI. So,
Okay.
And that's usually, there's a couple in kindergarten and a couple in first grade. So.
Okay, so then ignore me, it will be your last day of school. In the blue, you will write who is responsible. This may be just the name of your LEA. It might be the name of your school if you are a charter. It might be your first grade teachers, your intervention team, whoever is going to be responsible for implementing and carrying out this goal. In the purple, this is where you will address what needs to be changed. You will use your longitudinal data average, which I will show you how we calculate that in just a minute. You will add 3 to 5% to that average if you are setting a decrease goal, or you will choose to maintain that average if you are setting a maintenance goal from BOI to end of the year on Acadience Math or Acadience Reading and address the submeasure there. In the green, you will list the evidence-based strategies that you are going to use to try to achieve that goal. This may be implementing professional learning with all of your teachers. This may be utilizing coaching strategies. It may be implementing effective interventions with students who need support in this goal. You'll tell us the how of how you're going to achieve this. And then in yellow, this is the part that probably gets the most flags from us when LEAs are submitting goals and we have to send feedback. You do need to address the why. What is the purpose for completing this goal? Is it to improve the percentage of students who are meeting benchmark? Is it to improve early numeracy skills, number identification skills? There must be a why component to your goal. And I noticed in the chat there's a question, which Krista just answered, but Monica asked if all grade levels are making steady progress, do we automatically use submeasures as a goal? And Krista said, yes, you could look at what's happening in those submeasures, or you can continue to focus. If you have focused on an area and you do still have every grade level making consistent goals, but you want to keep, or making consistent growth, but you want to keep working towards that composite goal, that's totally fine too. It's not a must do to focus on a submeasure goal. You can still focus on the composite. The submeasures just allow you to dive in a little bit deeper to look at specifically what skills student need, where composite is that big calculated overall score. So it's just not going to be quite as targeted. Monica, does that answer your question? Okay, perfect. All right, so moving on from that language frame, we have two different kinds of goals that are going to be accepted on this plan this year. And for those of you who are veterans at submitting these plans, that is a little different than in the past. In the past, we have had 3. We have also included what we called a decrease goal. For those who are new, that might sound weird. Why would we want students to decrease? But it was focused on decreasing the percentage of students scoring below or well below. However, given the limitations of what Acadience Learning Online ALO provides in terms of historical data, we are not going to have decrease goals this year just because right now the ALO platform does not give you access to that historical below benchmark data in the same way that Acadience Data Management and Amplify have in the past. So we are only going to have maintenance goals and increase goals. And I wanted to make a note on maintenance goals because we do get frequently a lot of questions as to why would an LEA ever want to set a goal to just maintain when in our educator hearts, it feels weird to say that we want to keep the number the same, that we always want to see growth. When it would be appropriate to set a maintenance goal is when you're looking at your longitudinal data average. If you consistently across years are seeing a negative percentage change, that means that the students who are scoring at benchmark at the beginning of the year are no longer all scoring at benchmark at the end of the year. You have a smaller number of students performing at benchmark at end of year than beginning of the year, which means that you are over time seeing a loss. You are having fewer students meet that benchmark at the end of the year after receiving a year of core instruction than who met the benchmark at the beginning of the year. In that case, when you have a negative longitudinal average, that is when we recommend setting a maintenance goal, because rather than seeing that dip from beginning of the year to end of year, it is a good goal and an more attainable goal necessarily than having a goal to increase the percentage is a goal to maintain the percentage, meaning that you want to have the same percentage of students who scored at or above benchmark at the beginning of the year still scoring at or above benchmark when that benchmark criteria is higher at the end of the year. So if your longitudinal average has historically been negative, that is why we suggest setting a maintenance goal, because we're not setting a goal to just keep the status quo. It's more about having effective enough core instruction so that the students who started the year on benchmark are still showing growth, because we know the benchmark cutoffs are higher at end of the year than at the beginning of the year, are showing growth and maintaining through that core instruction, maintaining that at benchmark level. So I hope that clears up some of the questions about why we would recommend a maintenance goal, and can help you explain. I know we've had questions in the past where people are like, we know we should set a maintenance goal, but we can't explain it to our board. A maintenance goal is still focused on growth because we know that benchmark changes from beginning of the year to end of the year. It's about not losing the percentage of students who started the year on benchmark and having fewer students at the end of the year. And it's likely more attainable than setting a goal to increase that percentage if historically you have had a lower percentage of students making benchmark at the end of the year than at the beginning of the year. So, as I said, if you have that negative percentage, that was a lot of words to explain what is not a lot of words on the screen, but we get a lot of questions about it. So I wanted to go into a little bit of detail. But if your longitudinal average is negative, showing that the percentage of students decreased from beginning of the year to end of the year, a maintenance goal is likely going to be the best bet for you to focus. So a maintenance goal would be what we would likely have set for our second graders or our kindergartners with that hypothetical data. And I'm going to show you specifically how I would calculate that if I was going to be focusing on a composite maintenance goal, looking at the second grade data. So on my next slide, I have a little snippet of that second grade data from our hypothetical LEA. And so what I'm looking at to calculate my longitudinal average is the difference from beginning of the year to end of the year for each of those 3 years. So in year one, at the beginning of the year, 75% of students were at or above benchmark. At the end of the year, 69% were. So for year one, if you look in that middle column, I noted a negative 6% change because we decreased from 75% to 69%, making at or above benchmark. In year two, at BOY, we had 71%. At the end of the year, we had 66%. I noted a negative 5% change. Year three, we had 75% at beginning of the year. At the end of the year, we had 74%. So I noted a negative 1% change. And then to get that longitudinal average, you will just calculate a mathematical average. You'll add those 3 years up, -6 plus -5 plus -1, and divide by 3 years to get your longitudinal average of -4. And as I said, if you have a negative average, this is where there's a little bit of choice. If your average is -3 or lower, we highly, highly, highly recommend making that maintenance goal, because it's unlikely, it's possible, but it's unlikely to make a bigger percentage change than 3 to 5% in just 1 year of instruction. If you have a percentage change of 0, -1, or -2. You can set an increase goal if you want to, or you can choose to set that maintenance goal. We leave that choice up to you. If you have an average that is not perfectly rounded, like my example here, if you end up with a -4.3 or 4.6, because we are dividing by 3, just round. We use regular rounding conventions. If it's 0.3, we round down. If it's 0.6, we round up. You can do the same thing as you're setting your goal. So using the language frame that I described before, this is what your maintenance goal could sound like. So if my hypothetical last day of school was June 1st, 2025, my LEA will maintain the percentage of second grade students who are scoring at or above benchmark on Acadience Math Composite from beginning of the year to end of the year by providing ongoing professional learning and job-embedded coaching with all second grade teachers, including classroom observations and feedback on the implementation of number talks and numeracy routines to increase the likelihood of students scoring at or above benchmark at the end of the year. This sentence frame includes all 5 of those components. It is based on data. It checks all the boxes of what is required in code for our goals. Now, before I move on to our other goal type for this year, does anyone have any questions about maintenance goals? Can you write a maintenance goals for submeasures? Yes, Erin, you absolutely can. I made the example of setting it based on the composite, based on that overall data, but you can absolutely set a goal to maintain at a specific submeasure as well. Any other questions? All right, and if anything comes up, please feel free to drop that question into the chat. The other type of goal that you could set for your plan this year is an increase goal, and this is going to be the most appropriate if your data is already showing that the percent of students scoring at or above benchmark in the past 3 years, that longitudinal average, if it is either already being maintained, so you have a 0% percentage change, or it is already positive. You're already seeing some growth from beginning of the year to end of year, but not quite meeting that 80% target. Setting an increase goal in that case would be appropriate. And I will show you again what that might look like with our hypothetical data. And this time I am going to focus on the submeasures, but in preface of the question that Erin just asked about, can you set a maintenance goal for a submeasure? You can set either a maintenance goal or an increase goal based on the composite or based on the specific submeasure. Either type of goal can be set for either piece of data. These are just the examples that I'm using so that I don't have to walk you through the process 100 times. But we do have, and we're going to share the links for you later, videos that address how to set your goals similar to the presentation I'm giving today, that are on YouTube that you can watch as many times as you need. So you do have the resource, and we will be sharing the recording to today's session and the session from last week out in an email as soon as it processes at the end of the day today. It might get out to you tomorrow because we'll have to wait for our video guide to make that YouTube link, but you will have access to these videos and the ones on YouTube so that you can look back and reference as needed. But so to set the increase goal, as I said, this is going to be the kind of goal that you want to set if you have that longitudinal change that is either already being maintained, where it's a 0% change, or a higher positive percentage change. So for our example, go ahead.
Is it working on there?
Oh, okay. I was like, someone came off mute. I thought they had a question, but it must have just been an accidental unmute, which is totally fine. So for my example, I'm going to zoom in on that number identification fluency data that we looked at before. And as I said, I'm going to focus on that number identification fluency just because that is the more foundational skill than next number fluency. It does not mean that you could not in your LEA, if next number fluency is something that you wanted to focus on, you're like, no, that's really going to be our target this year. We're really working on strategic counting. We're implementing counting routines across the board. You could still make an argument for setting that instead of doing number identification fluency. That's totally fine. This goal is meant to be what's best for your LEA and what aligns most with what you want to see happen, as long as it is based on the need that the data shows. So zooming in again on that number identification fluency data, I go through the same process of calculating my longitudinal average. I will look at all 3 years and find the difference between beginning of the year and end of the year. So in year 1, the students started the year with 55% of them making benchmark, and at the end of the year, it was still 55%. So we saw that 0% change. So I would note that for year 1. In year 2, we had 55% of students start the year at benchmark. However, 52% ended the year at benchmark. So there was a negative change that year. So I would note a negative 3% change. And in year 3, 54% of the students started the year on benchmark. 58% of the students ended the year on benchmark. So I had a positive 4% change. And when I added all of those up, divide it by 3, I end up with a positive 1% average. Since that is a positive percentage change, that indicates that an increase goal is going to be the most appropriate to set a goal that is both ambitious and attainable. And when we're setting an increase goal, the way we do that is we take the longitudinal average, so that positive 1%, and we add 3 to 5 percentage points to that change. So when I was setting my goal, I would either set the goal to increase by 4%, by 5%, or by 6%. And your LEA gets to make the choice how ambitious you want to be. If you're like, we're really going to be targeting this, we're going to be providing professional learning, we're going to be supporting teachers, we want to see as much growth as possible, you could set that 6% increase goal to increase by 5 percentage points in the next year. Or if you're like, we're just getting started implementing this, this is going to be new for teachers, you could set that goal to just increase by 4%, adding 3% to your longitudinal average. Question in the chat. What is an expected average of BOI proficiency for a grade level if we want 80% or more students proficient by end of the year? If your BOI average is in the high 40s, the average has not changed much in 3 years. Monica, I would say that it's not especially given that this assessment has only been, the math assessment specifically, I know Monica's asking about math, has not been implemented for a huge amount of time. I don't think it's crazy to not see a huge change over time. However, if those averages are continuing to stay really stagnant in the composite, that would be a good time to potentially look at the specific submeasures and dive in to see what areas you might want to focus more strategically on for specific skills and skill routines that could be implemented in the classroom. And a good place to look, let me pull real quick because this is something I don't have saved, is in the Acadience Learning Assessment Manual. At the end of this manual, I don't have the exact page off the top of my head. It does show you how to hand calculate the percentage for each submeasure, how they're calculated into the composite score, and you can see which submeasures are weighted more heavily. That might be a place where you're like, I want to focus specifically on this submeasure in this grade because that's what's most heavily weighted and going to have the biggest impact on their composite score, and just making sure that aligns with, like, is this the most critical foundational sub skill? Does that make sense?
I don't want to throw us, I don't want to throw us all off. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. But what I was specifically asking is when students are moving from first grade to second grade or second to third, they're high, like we have maybe 70% proficient at the end of the year of first grade. But then when they come in and they take their BOY, we're back down to like 48% proficient. So my first question was, is that normal? Like, is that amount normal? Because it feels like we're making this massive growth and movement within the year, but then when they go and take their beginning of the year, the next year, we're back down to that 48%. And maybe that's just normal, but I don't know.
Yeah, I would say that that's not atypical, and it's not something that I would sound the alarms and have big concern if you're seeing that dip from 1 year's end of the year benchmark score to the following year's beginning of the year score within a group of students, just because the end of year benchmark in, say, first grade is entirely different than the beginning of the year benchmark in second. That beginning of the year is really meant to be your starting line. So if you are
Yeah.
seeing that dip, but then seeing growth over, like tremendous growth over the course of the year, I would say your tier one instruction is still really effective. So
Okay.
I wouldn't be super concerned about that.
Okay. It just feels like, oh my gosh, we're starting again at that point. And yeah, okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions before we continue on? Okay, so taking that we had our positive longitudinal average, we're going to add 3 to 5% to that average to set our increase goal. We can use our language frame again, and here's an example of what that increase goal might look like. So it says by June 1st, 2025, my LEA will increase the percentage of kindergarten students who are scoring at or above benchmark on Acadian's math number identification fluency from beginning of the year to end of the year by, I chose the middle, by 5%, by providing ongoing professional learning with all kindergarten teachers on number sense routines to develop a strong foundation in students' number identification skills. So it has all of those components, including how much we wanted to increase from beginning of the year to the end of the year. And I wanted to touch just real quick on Monica's question, because it got at something that we also get a lot of questions on. We do set these goals in the way that we do based on longitudinal averages, rather than setting the goals on a specific cohort of students, largely because we are setting the goals using historical data. We don't know necessarily where that group of last year's first graders, how they're going to score when they come into second grade. So this is why we set the goals the way we do, so that you're focused on a percentage change rather than getting a target percentage, rather than getting 60% or 70% of the students scoring at benchmark, just because you can't necessarily predict how that group of students is going to score when they start the year next year. So actually really appreciate that question, Monica, because it touches on something that we have to answer questions about very frequently. Any questions about setting or any other questions, I guess, about setting an increase goal before we continue on? And as you're setting your goals, similar to what I mentioned before about the math components of your plan, take a look at your historical goals over the last few years. If you don't have access to your historical plans, we do have them all saved. We are happy to send them to you if you need them. But take a look at your historical goals and whether or not you have met them in the past. If goals have not been being met, take some time to reflect and ask why those goals weren't met and potentially adjust. If you've been targeting composite goals, maybe it's time to drill down into some specific sub-measures and focus really heavily on specific skills. Maybe it's time to adjust grade level goals. Ask yourself those reflective questions, and we are here to support you if you need some help looking at them to see what is working and what can be adjusted in the future. And with that, someone just came off mute. Megan, did you have a question?
I'm so sorry.
No, you are totally fine. I just wanted to make sure you had an opportunity to ask if you did have a question. With that, we have managed to still be ahead of schedule ever so slightly this morning. And we are going to take a brief break since we just dumped a tremendous amount of information on you. We want to give you some time to process. And we are at 10:08 now, and since we are still a hair above schedule, I think we can give you an extra 2 minutes of break and round to the next nice even minute. So let's come back at 10:20 and we will take a 12-minute break to process the information we just received. Get up, stretch your legs, take a bio break. We will see you back here in 12 minutes.
All right, it is 10:20. So we will just kind of give everybody a couple of seconds to gather back up your teams as coming back from that break, and then we'll get going into the professional learning grant application and what that will be for this year. Not a lot of changes, just so you know, but we still want to go over that application and some additional information. I'll just give everybody a second to make sure everybody's gathered back up, and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so good news is everything that happened in legislative session, professional learning grant, nothing got removed from professional learning grant. Those funds are still available to all of our LEAs. And so we have that program and the application to share with you today. So first thing I want to talk about real quick is the board rule, which is R277-326. Let's see, this is June. So back in May, we took this board rule to our finance committee to have lines 6 and 7 removed from part 4 of, or part 3 of the grant. And that is because what line 6 and 7 had happening was, as we would get the new funding for the next fiscal year, we would have to go back 2 years and see if the LEAs have spent the money. And if they hadn't, then we had to reduce the new amount from the new amount. And we, as a team, did not feel that that was fair to our LEAs, that to take away money. And so we went to the board asking to have lines 6 and 7 removed. And then as of last Thursday, the full board approved that. So we no longer have line 6 or 7. And so once that was done, we went ahead and calculated all of the estimated funding amounts. And that spreadsheet is in the folder to show you what you would be expecting to get. And I know Molly's probably finding the link to drop in there for everybody. But we were waiting to find out about those 2 lines. They have approved to have them removed. And so we were able to calculate funding amounts without removing any funds from everybody. And so most LEAs have pretty close to the same amount that they have had in the past, unless there is a huge change in the number of teachers within their LEA in that preschool through 3rd grade space. But overall, not a big difference in the amounts, but nobody has to worry about having funds reduced because of line 6 and 7 anymore. So good news for professional learning grant. All right, so thinking about professional learning grant, remember that this is to improve the quality of instruction in the early grade classrooms by providing preschool through 3rd grade teachers with focused, sustained, evidence-based professional learning opportunities and job-embedded coaching. I will say that this year we have had many preschool directors reach out asking about this because it is preschool through 3rd grade. I have been redirecting them to make sure that they are talking to their LEA level literacy and math leaders, as they are the ones that do get the application and turn it in for approval. So if you are getting messages, I'm just sending them back to their LEA literacy and math leaders. And so on that note as well, Julie has done this grant in the past. With her new position, I am taking over the program management of the professional learning grant for the team. So I will be the contact with any questions or anything like that pertaining to this grant now. So when we think of professional learning, USBE has specific guidelines for what professional learning should look like, and that makes up and guides the grant itself. So professional learning should be focused, which means it's targeted to strategies that align with an LEA's plan and goals that support improving outcomes. It's evidence-based, so strategies that have demonstrated a statistically significant effect on improving student outcomes.
So it was really hard just to begin with.
And then sustained, so multiple professional learning sessions with ongoing support for implementation for long-term change. So one and done is not professional learning. That would be like a training. So we want to make sure that this is ongoing has opportunities for the next part, which is the job embedded part. So that's learning during the workday with the intent of improving student learning outcomes. So a lot of the same theme here is looking at our student outcomes as well when it comes to professional learning opportunities for our educators. So again, just to narrow down the differences, that professional learning is what we're looking at for this grant. Comprehensive, sustained, evidence-based approach to improving teachers' and principals' effectiveness in raising student achievement, and with the intended result that there are system-wide changes in student outcomes. When we think about professional development, that's one-time workshops, seminars, or lectures. That's that one-size-fits-all approach, the one and done. Structure is generally very passive and focused on providing educators with information or updates. And training is like what we're doing today. So it's educational, and we're working through how to do something specific. So when we think of professional learning, it's that top piece when you are putting together your grant to keep in mind. As we're reviewing them, we're looking for those 4 points from the previous slide, but also that we're looking at this comprehensive system for those system-wide changes within your LEA. It's always one step behind me here. Okay, so for the professional, it will still be put into Utah grants. So this is the one grant that still goes into Utah grants. So it will go through pre-approval, which we'll talk about. It does not need to go to your local board for approval. It is not part of the early learning plan. It is separate from that. So it no longer needs to go to, actually, I shouldn't say that. It never needed to go to your board for local approval. So it just needs to, we look for it, we'll look through it, provide feedback, give you pre-approval. And then when Utah grants opens up, which we're hoping about mid-July working with our finance team, but we'll email you when it is ready to go. And then you can just get it uploaded in there, putting in that budget in your budget narrative. We'll put in your application for you because we'll have a copy of it, and then approve the funding for you. It should include the type of professional learning opportunities that the LEA is planning to utilize, and then describe how the professional learning opportunities are comprehensive, focused, sustained, job embedded, and evidence-based. So making sure we hit those points. And then also with the application, it's to show how your LEA's learning plan are targeted to the goals. So if you have literacy for your professional learning grant, you're still working on improving literacy outcomes. So we've got that covered. Math, you have it in your plan as well. And also looking at those benchmark scores. And then we have provided 2 links to the Utah Professional Learning Standards and then the Standards Toolkit. And so the Professional Learning Standards just takes you to the USBE website, and you can kind of go through the different information. But then that toolkit, actually, I call it a book. Like, it has all of them together, a few more details, some additional information. So those 2 resources are there for you. Molly has dropped them in the chat box as well to help you as you are putting together some professional learning opportunities within your LEA. So when we look at the application, every LEA needs to complete this first page. Now, this is an optional grant, which means that LEAs can waive the funds, but we need to have the record that shows that you are waiving the funds. So if you are waiving the funds, you would still have to fill in this part here. And then down here, you would just click in, we are choosing to waive the professional learning grant funds. And then you would send it to this email here, the earlylearning@schools.utah.gov. And we will make note that you're waiving the funds. And then when it opens up in Utah grants, then you would go in and make it official. If you are going to use the funds, then you fill in the information at the top and then click here, we are applying for professional learning grant funds, and then complete the rest of the application. The application is linked to the picture on this slide. So whether you're in the Google presentation or you're here on Nearpod, if you click here, it should open up the professional learning grant application. And then just as we did with the plan itself, you come over here, hit download Microsoft Word, and go ahead and download it Once again, Microsoft Word for this, it's going to that shared early learning inbox for the team for it to be available for all of us to review if needed. And so there's no Google account connected to that. So download it as a Microsoft Word document, get it saved. You can do your information and then save it again and send it to us for review. So that first page, whether you're waiving the funds or going to use the funds, need to be completed by every LEA. And then you'll go into the rest of the plan. And we're going to go over each section of the application. So as a reminder of what information is needed. We also have put together a look-fors for the professional learning grant application that you can find in the folder as well. It is dropped in the chat box. And it is just like the one for the early learning plan. We have gone through, as soon as it opens up here, and put the little notes of boxes that need to be checked and some examples of anything that you need to include in there. So once again, side by side. I see a question for clarification. Do goals need to be approved by the board first, then and then no. So Molly will go over how that whole approval thing and pre-approval will work with your plan this year. So Molly will go over that after we do professional learning. So right now we're just focusing on that professional learning grant. But we will get to the plan process of submission and all of that after the professional learning side of this. So we have that look-fors to help with all of that as well. All right, let me get back to, there we go. So just some things to remember, pre-approval for the professional learning grant, because it does go into Utah grants. LEAs have up until August 28th. So anytime from now to August 28th, you can send your application. We'll review it, provide feedback, let you know it's been pre-approved. And then once Utah grants opens up, you can put it in there. It has to be in there by September 1st at 5 p.m. But last year we found Julie had gone ahead and just set it to a couple of days before. It made it a lot easier for LEAs because it wasn't a rut. It didn't need to go to your local board for approval or anything like that. So it gave you a little bit more time to work through it all for this application. So August 28th for pre-approval. If you just submit it into Utah grants without the team reviewing it first by that September 1st due date, just know that as we look at it and review it, even though it's in Utah grants, you may need to go back and do some to it to make sure that it's meeting the requirements that are in code and board rule for the grant. So we do recommend, especially since we're going to August 28th, send it to us before you put it into Utah grants so that we can provide you feedback and let you know if it's ready or if there's some changes that need to be made to make sure that it's meeting those requirements from the code and board rule. And then, so now we're going to, oh, we have a little quiz. I forgot about the quiz. Okay, so actually it's not a quiz. Quiz comes later. But we just talked about a few things for professional learning grant. And so this is just, you have some words down here and you just get to, if you're in the Nearpod, if you're not in Nearpod, it doesn't really show up in the Google slide. But in Nearpod, you have these words down here. So you look here, I know the first word is going to be do. So I just move it up there and then complete the rest of the sentences. So I'll give you, it doesn't take long. So I'll just give you about 30 seconds or so to go ahead and complete it. And then we'll quickly go over the answers to make sure these are just some highlights about the grant as we get started. And after you fill in, make sure you hit done and it lets us know how many people have been working on it. Oh, we've got some people who are listening. Even though I was talking fast. All right. Okay, give just a few more seconds here. I can see some people are working on it. All right, we've got quite a few people with results in. So this first part here is I do not need local board approval of my LEA's P3 professional learning grant. If my P3 professional learning grant is blank, the early learning team will, so if my grant is pre-approved, then the early learning team will attach it into Utah Grants for you. We know that you have multiple copies of your plan and in this document. And so to find the one that's marked pre-approved, we know there's a lot to go through. So we save it on our end, and then we can just quickly find it and drop it in there for you after you submit your budget narrative, and then submit it in Utah Grants. That first time that we receive it is when we can attach your plan for you. So just know that if we've given you pre-approval, we'll take care of that part for you. And then the last part here is final submission of the grant is due September 1st by 5 p.m. in Utah Grants. So that is just the beginning part of the grant. So thank you all for participating in that. And we are going to now move into the application. So again, right here, you could link to the look-fors, and each screenshot here has from the application and then from the look-fors. So the first part is, if you have said that you're going to use the funds, you just need to let us know if it's in early literacy, early math, and what grades. These funds can be used for professional learning in early literacy and in early math. So we have some LEAs that just do math. We have some LEAs that just do literacy, and we have many that do both. So know that you can use these funds for both early literacy and early math. If you are choosing to do both, you make sure that you have checked for throughout, provided the information for literacy and for math as you go through. As we go through it, you'll see that we have divided it into 2 sections, so you can make sure that you have information for both areas if that is what you are choosing to do. So you just have to let us know what area and what grade levels that you are using these funds for. And then to get started, this is where our first question, oops, getting a little crazy there. Our first question is to name the professional learning opportunity you'll be providing in your LEA. So the look-fors does have some examples. I will share a list with you in a little bit of some other professional learning opportunities that the team has reviewed and found that they meet the professional learning standards, which and could be available to you to look into and see if there is a new professional learning that you would like to implement within your LEA. But we have many that know what they're doing, and so this is where you would let us know what that opportunity is. And then the next question, what are you using the funds for? So there are specific things that these funds can be used for as for professional learning. So the first thing is it could be used for teacher stipends to attend professional learning. So if you are your teachers, your educators you have going through professional learning, you want to compensate them for completing the professional learning, provide a stipend. That is what these funds could be used for. That could be used for presenter fees. So if the professional learning is involving a presenter, then you could use the funds to support the cost of the presenter. Coaching support. So being job embedded coaching, if there are things that your coach needs to be able to support the teachers as they're going through the professional learning, then these funds can be used for that. Substitute teachers. So once again, if you have sent your teachers off to a training or professional learning and you need to bring substitutes in, and these funds can be used to cover the salary benefits, however you look at it, for those substitute teachers. Supplies and materials for teacher professional learning. So this is the supplies and materials for the teachers, not for students. So make sure that it's for the teachers as part of their professional learning. And then the last one is to hire a coach to support that P3 literacy or math space. And so we can see that this is a big area this year, especially with what happened with a lot of our early literacy funding. So if you are looking at how to support the coaches that you have, These funds can be used to supplement and add to that salaries and benefits for those coaches in your early literacy and early math space. So you would just check what areas you're going to use those funds for. And the next question is, describe how the professional learning opportunities are comprehensive, focused, sustained, job embedded, and evidence-based. And all we need is just like a brief paragraph that describes your professional learning. On the look-fors, these bulleted points are just like little tidbits of what the information should include. Do not copy and paste what's in that box into your explanation, because what you have to describe to us has to be specific to your professional learning opportunity. So this use more as, have I explained that it's focused? Have I explained how it's sustained? Have I done a good explanation for job embedded? Have I done well with evidence and based? Do I talk about a strategy? Things like that is what you're using the look-fors completing this section. Up here, yeah, on the look-fors, we have added that list of different professional learning opportunities that have been reviewed by the team and have been found to meet the standards for professional learning. So if there's something new you're looking for, there's an easy way to access some of those. Here, we also have them listed on a slide in a little bit. So that's question 3. And then question 4, describe how your LEA intends to increase benchmark assessment scores and related outcomes through these professional learning opportunities. So again, just a brief paragraph giving us that information. And then the next part is the part that tends to take a little bit longer. And again, we're going to say the bullet points on the look-fors are just to help guide you and making sure that you have included this information. This is not, I'm going to take, yeah, it does all this. I'm going to copy and paste it onto my application. We will provide feedback that it needs to be specific to what you're saying your professional learning is. And you'll have to go back and make some revisions to it, because these are just little guiding points to help you in writing out the information for the application. So each box does have those little things to think about, and you will see that there's a literacy and a math column. So if you are doing both, you need to make sure you have something in both of them pertaining to that professional learning that you have noted in the previous questions. So going along with our professional learning standards, there's a focus on learning communities, skillful leaders, and in that toolkit and on the website, you'll find more information about these. If you're not sure or you're thinking, I think it means this, I get an idea from the description here, but I need a little bit more, that toolkit will help you in getting a little bit more information as well. And then we have resources and data. And then learning designs is the next area. And then we have implementation and outcomes. And then our last one focuses on technology. So information on each of those standards needs to be included in the application as part of that submission. So those are the areas that we will be reviewing when you submit and provide feedback if more information is needed.
I'm willing to play nice.
And then our next, so any questions about the application itself? Really no changes from previous years. And so I think pretty much everybody, what they see, everybody's like, oh yeah, I remember this one. Okay, I see, let's see. I missed something up here. Okay, question in the chat box. Now that the early learning grant is not tied to money, will the professional learning grant be tied to any type of monetary punishment, in quotes, if we don't meet the goals in the early learning grant? No, the professional learning grant has never other than you letting us know, like, you know, you're using this to increase those student outcomes. It's never been tied with any of the meeting the goals or not meeting the goals off of the plan, because there's really not a connection in the state code or board rule with the two plans, or the application and the plan. So no worries. This is just every year, as long as the legislators continue to fund it, these funds are available to our LEAs. And there's just that application piece to make sure that professional learning funds are being used for professional learning that's meeting the state definitions of professional learning. So I hope that helps, and kind of like for everyone when it comes to that. It's really just getting you some funding to help with providing those opportunities, because we know that our educators, this is a constant need for everyone in education. And so if we can have those funds there to help you find opportunities that are continuing to increase the tools that our educators have in early literacy and early math, then the goals that you do write on your plan, the chances of meeting those goals continues to increase as well. So it's more of a support for that, not they're intertwined and interact off each other or anything like that. So I hope that helps clarify that. It was a good question, so that's why I just answered it here instead of back in a message back to the person who asked. So hope that helps with everything. Okay, so no questions about the application. So we're gonna go ahead and look at the last part of the application, which is the assurances. So that first assurance is just that you're assuring that the LEA will be in compliance with state code and Utah board rule. And then that second assurance is that if you are using the funds, there is a pre and post survey that gets sent out. It goes to usually superintendents and charter directors to disperse throughout their LEA to get to those teachers that have gone through the professional learning that was noted on the plan, and a questionnaire about the pre-survey is just, you know, where are you at this point in time? And then the post survey just kind of goes through, you know, the growth that has happened, and then that gets reported to the state in a report in November to the legislators. So we need to keep up with that because that gives them the information to continue with this grant as well. So part of the assurance is to make sure that you are aware that there's a pre and post survey that is distributed for completion, and then information back to the state to provide about what is happening with the growth of our educators across the state. Okay, so that is the whole application, including the assurances. This next slide just goes through some of those other professional learning opportunities that we as a team have reviewed, checked to make sure that it meets the standards that are part of our professional learning standards for the state and can be used for this grant. And so if you are looking for something new, here are some things that you could look at. We have, especially on the literacy side, provided a couple of preschool ones that have come to us and said, hey, we got this for your preschool teams. We reviewed it, and we know that they know of many more as well, but we wanted to add those to the list as well, with this being a P3 professional learning grant. So some opportunities there if you're looking for something new or need some ideas. So a reminder of the funding uses, just that those teacher stipends for those that are attending the professional learning, presenter fees, coaching supports, substitute teachers, hire a coach or specialist, and supplies and materials for teacher professional learning. So once again, supplies for the teachers that are in the professional learning, not for students. So unallowable expenses would be the purchase of property, purchase of equipment, other services. There it says student materials or supplies, and then travel related expenses. So our next slide, we know that many across the state have educators that are finishing letters, but we also have educators that are joining that haven't had letters, and we have many LEAs that want them to continue to have letters, and because they want them to be at the same level as all the educators that have gone through it. So you can still use these funds for professional learning, and Julie, a couple years ago, put together this easy letters application that you can submit if you are choosing to use this for letters. And so Molly has dropped the link in the chat box. If you open that up, and I will bring it over here so we can actually take a look at it here. So what you would need to fill out if you are planning to use this for letters is you need to fill out your LEA name and the date. It is already checked down here that you are applying for these funds. And it is already marked down here, early literacy. K through 3 is marked. If you are using this for early childhood letters as well, you could go through and mark the P for the preschool space. And then it's already marked that it's using for letters. And then you would just have to click the boxes that you're going to use the funds for. But all the other information pertaining to letters is already filled out. Now, if you're choosing to use it for letters and also math, then you would use the same one, but you would have to go through and fill in the information for math. So just know that if you're using it for letters, it is there. And then if you need to add information for math, you can just use this same one. And then once you go through, fill it out with the parts that are noted, the assurances are already checked as well. And then you submit it to that early learning schools.utah.gov website or email. We'll review it. And if it's good to go, we'll let you know that, once it's ready in Utah Grants, you can go ahead and submit your budget. So, like I said, an easy way if you're using it for letters because it is a lot of information, all be the same for everybody. So this was put together a few years ago to simplify that for our LEAs. So that's if you are choosing to use it for letters. That one would already be done. Okay. Let me go ahead and take this part off and get back to any questions about that information. So Natalie asked, I thought letters was over now. Can we still use it for letters? Yes. We know that we have LEAs that would like to continue to use it for possibly new educators that are coming in. We have some LEAs that are looking at having somebody who's already gone through it do the training of the trainers. They can facilitate it within their LEAs each year. So these funds could be used for that as well. So it can still be used for letters. We still have educators. It's a professional learning. So if you're looking at continuing to have that capacity within your LEA, yes, you can still use it for letters. All right.
One thing that is worth noting, and I don't think Krista said it yet, is it does have to be used in the P3 space. So if you're using it for letters, you can't use it for letters for your 4th through 6th grade teachers. It does have to be used in the early space. But as Krista said, if you want to do the train the trainer training and train someone who could then within your LEA do the upper grades, that would be an option of how you could use the funds.
Yes. And also keep in mind, because the letters does come under SB 127, that the educators that it can be used for has to follow that. So we had a question last week about paraprofessionals. Letters cannot be used. If you're doing letters professional grant, it has to be like your licensed educators, the administrators, your school psychologists, special ed teachers. It can't be the paraprofessionals, just as we are following what's in that code. Can it be used for letters for admin as admin support K-3 teachers? Yes, just because they are part of that, and it is very beneficial for our school leaders to know what our teachers have been doing in that space as well. So yes, if it's for letters and you have an easy thing to use, you have an easy application to fill out for that, if that is the way that your LEA would like to use these funds. Okay, I'm just checking to make sure there's no more questions popping in. Okay, so for the submission of your application, very similar to what we have done with this grant in the past, you are going to write a draft and you email it to our email address. We'll review it. If approval, if that pre-approval is granted, we will let you know, and we send you that pre-approved application. If the revisions are needed, we provide you feedback. We can go back and forth with that as many times as we need to. Our goal with that is just to make sure that what you are submitting meets all of the needs that are stated in that state code, board rule, and also matching with what the definitions of professional learning are. And then after you have that pre-approval from the team, you will go into Utah Grants when it's ready. As I said earlier, we're hoping that that will be about mid-July. Last year, there was a delay just because of the rollover with the new fiscal year, but we will keep you updated on any.
Krista just froze on my end. I see Denise nodding, so I think she may have frozen on across the board. But she, I'm sure, will rejoin us. Oh, she is unfrozen now. Krista, you froze for a moment. Are you here?
I am. I could still hear you.
So strange. Technology is so fun.
Yes, and I was like, my internet is not unstable, so I don't know.
Oh, you're frozen again. Something's going on your end.
Is it working now?
Yeah, you might just need to leave your video off.
I will just not be on video. That might be good anyways. Who knows? It is not it's not saying it's unstable. It's saying it's full. So I don't know what's going on.
All good. Krista, there was a question. Someone direct messaged me in the chat that I do not know the answer to. They asked if we know the passing score for the foundational reading test.
We do, but I don't know what it is off the top of my head. I'll have to go look it up after I get done.
Okay.
I know, Krista, I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, thank you, Denise. I know we shared it at LD meeting in March, so I was just gonna go back and find that information, but if Denise found it faster than me, we're good to go. Okay, let's see here. So I was talking about the submission. So you'll put that project abstract and your budget narrative into Utah Grants. We will attach your application, and all that needs to be done by September 1st. Once everything is approved, then funding is awarded to your LEA. Just a note, you need to make sure that those assurances on the last page of the plan are checked. And that is one of the things that we'll look for when you submit for us to review, that they're checked. And if they're not, we'll just remind you they need to be checked as part of this submission. But we like to put that little note on there because lots of times we get all the information in there and we're done. And we save it and send it on and then forgot that there were those assurances at the end. So that is for submission. Okay, so any questions? Because now we have a little quiz. So any questions about professional learning grant? I know it's a lot of information that comes with this and a lot of questions as we start putting together. So please know you can reach out at any time if you have questions about filling out the application or what needs to be in certain boxes or anything like that. We are here to help and support in any way. So know you can reach out to us at any time with questions as you've processed all of this. We know it takes a couple of days. Okay, so the last part here is going to be just a quick little quiz. And so you have 3 questions and you just need to choose the answer and then we'll go over it. So I'll give you like 30 seconds again. It's not very long, quick and easy. I just want to review a few points about the P3 Professional Learning Grant. All right, so we've got some answers coming in. So our first one here, is there a look for us for the P3 Professional Learning Grant application? Our answer is yes for that one. Our next question is, if I'm using the funds to support LETRS Professional Learning, what do I need to complete on the LETRS Professional Learning Grant template? you would need to complete the LEA name, the date, and then check the boxes in question 3 that correspond how the funds will be used. And then our last question, what do I need to include in Utah grants when I submit if I have pre-approval? That will be your budget narrative and budget. We will upload your application for you once we get notice that you have submitted. All right, so that is the end of professional learning grant. Like I said, if you have any questions that come up as you continue to process all the information and start working on the application, please do not hesitate to reach out to the team. We are here to support. And now it looks like I'm going to pass this over to Molly, and she's going to talk a little bit about how to submit your early learning plan and about the system of support.
Thanks, Krista. So we've had a couple questions already in the chat about how to submit your early learning plan and how that's going to look different this year. So hopefully I will answer all of those questions, but please do not hesitate to ask us as I'm going. So when we're submitting our early learning plans, as Krista mentioned before, it's going to look just a little bit different this year since there is no longer the early literacy grant tied to it. It actually simplifies the process for all of you. So in the past, we have done a whole process of pre-approval versus approval. This year, there is just going to be one pathway, and it is going to be the pathway that was historically our pre-approval plan. But we're just going to call it approval this year because you don't need to be pre-approved before things go into Utah Grant. You just need to have your plan approved by USBE before you take it to the board. Please don't take it to your board before we give you approval, because if we have to have you make changes, you end up having to go back to your board more than once, and we don't want anyone to have to do that. But so as we're going through this process, there are some things that you are going to have to do, and then some things that our team will do for you. The first thing you're going to do is that you're going to write your plan, complete all the components we talked about early this morning, and you are going to send that plan to our early learning inbox. The email is just earlylearning@schools.utah.gov. I'm dropping it in the chat. It's in this slideshow. Fairly easy to remember. That is a shared inbox that me, Krista, Denise, and the rest of our team all have access to. So whomever is available to attend to plans as they come in, we do try to be really quick about looking them over and providing feedback. We do review all 4 parts of your plan: the literacy, the math, the goals, and the assurances. We really do read every word. We really do double check the calculations on your goals, and we will provide you feedback. Please know that we are happy to provide you feedback. We've had a couple people recently refer to it as being dinged if your LEA received feedback from us and had to make changes. We're just trying to make sure that your plan meets all of the boxes and requirements and code and board rule before you take it to your local board. Know that we're just there to support when we send back revisions. We are not trying to ding you. But so we will send that back to you. So that initial draft of your plan does need to come to us no later than August 1st at 5 p.m. And we can go back and forth as many times as needed with feedback until your plan is complete and approved and ready to take it to your board, all the way up until September 1st. By September 1st, you do need to have an approved plan from us completed, and it needs to have been taken to your local board for approval. One thing to note, as we are going back and forth, if there is a feedback revision process going on, if there's some conflict going on with like the goal numbers that we're calculating versus the goal numbers that you're calculating not lining up, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We are more than happy to hop on a call with you to compare notes to make sure that we are calculating data in the same way. We want to make sure that the plan you set is based on the same data that we're using to calculate the goals, given that we're all having to do our plans with kind of the raw data that is in Acadience Data Management or Amplify or ALO right now, while our data and statistics and IT team later on will be using the official data once it is all submitted at by the end of this month and over the summer, and they run it through filters to remove first-year multilingual learners or students who didn't attend your LEA for the correct number of school days. They have a whole list of filters that they run based on the business rules, but we want to make sure that that's as accurate as possible. So please, throughout this whole process, don't hesitate to reach out. And one thing that we will also do, since everyone this year will be going through this approval process, we will upload your goals into the data gateway. So we're not going to spend time today talking about how to do that, because our USBE team will do that for all LEAs once they have approval from us. Something else to note that I'm not sure we went super in detail on is those assurances on the plan. Trista talked a little bit about the one pertaining to your literacy curriculum, but within those assurances, also we have the assurance that just states that everything in your plan is in compliance with all of the code and board rule that apply to this program. And then that last box, this is a little different than what we've done in the past, where you had to submit your local board minutes in Utah Grants. Since we aren't tying this plan to a grant application anymore, we are not requiring you to submit your local board minutes, but you are checking a box assuring that your plan will be reviewed and approved by your local board in an open and public meeting by that September 1st deadline. You don't need to send those minutes to us. We are trusting you. That being said, those minutes for all LEAs, for all board meetings, should be available somewhere. If the program is to be audited in the future, and we are asked to pull those minutes up to show that your plan was approved, we do need to be able to do that. So we will not go hunting for your minutes unless it happens, and the program is currently being audited for years past. So know that it does occasionally happen. So just making sure that we're not going to hunt you down to ensure that you do take your plan to your board, but you do need to do so because we don't want to be having to deal with punitive action in years down the road because you did not take your plan to your board this year. And we have, just to help you stay organized, because we love a good checklist that we can cross things off of, makes us feel accomplished. We do have a document with the early learning plan timeline and the steps that you need to go through. Some of them you could already cross off today because some of them are about completing your pre-work before this training and attending LIT training. But that just has all of those important dates on there. It has our early learning email address on there just to help you stay organized as you're going through this process. We know there's a lot of moving pieces and parts to get all of these pieces completed. Any questions about the submission process for the early learning plan, knowing that it does look a little different this year than it does in the past, in the past? Okay. If you have questions, don't hesitate to ask them as they pop into your brain. So the next piece I'm going to talk about is our system of support, which also is going to look a little bit different this year than it has in the past. So because of the changes that Krista talked about earlier from SB2 this past legislative session, literacy is no longer included in the system of support. So no matter where your LEA may have been in the literacy system of support in the past, literacy is no longer a component. However, the way that the legislature made changes to that code, math is still included in the system of support. And it states specifically that the state board must provide increasing levels of support, our system of support, to an LEA that fails to meet the combinations of goals for 2 consecutive years. So that includes the state mathematics growth goal that I discussed earlier of 60% of your 1st through 3rd grade students making typical or better progress as measured on Acadia's Math Pathways of Progress, and at least one of your local goals. I was going to say, I think I have that spelled out on the next slide. So for this upcoming school year, an LEA would be in the system of support officially if they did not meet their goals for the math growth goal and at least one of their local goals in math or literacy on the 2023-2024 plan. Because of that fun little piece of code that says you have to fail to meet those goals for 2 consecutive years, we have a clear as mud process in which if an LEA fails to meet their goals for 1 year, if it's the first time not meeting those goals, you're in what we call internal action. where we at USBE are happy to provide you supports as much or as little as you want during that internal action year, but that is kind of just you're like, hey, something's up. You should probably look at what's going on in your math instruction and potentially make changes. If you are in your second year of not meeting your goals, that's when you would be in our official system of support. And what that looks like is also going to be a little bit different, given that it's going to be for math rather than for literacy. In the literacy space, there are 3 designated K3 early literacy specialists. In the math space, I am the only designated early math specialist. We do have another elementary math specialist. Trish is leaving us in just a few weeks, so we will be hiring someone else into that position. But based on how many LEAs do fall into that second year of not meeting the required goals is going to have some influence on what the system of support looks like for math this year. So that information will be forthcoming, but if your LEA did not meet your goals last year, you would have received notification either from me or someone else on the early learning team about not meeting your goals for math and being in internal action last year. If you did not receive that notification, you likely met your goals and you are fine. And this year, if you do not meet them, it would just be internal action for you. We will provide more information for those LEAs who are in the system of support for math officially because they did not meet goals 2 years in a row. As we receive that data back from our data and statistics and IT teams, which will likely be around the time that school is starting in the August-September timeframe is when you would be getting notifications about that, and we will be able to provide a little bit more information. What I can share with you right now is a draft, and know that this draft may change, but a draft of what our menu for the math system of support may look like moving forward. Let me just, struggling with my copy and paste. Give me just a second. There we go. This is just a draft of what that math system of support menu may look like, knowing that it might peak and change slightly as we know how many LEAs we're going to be supporting and as we bring on a new elementary math specialist. But because of the length of time that we've had these plans in place and had accountability for them, every LEA would either be not in the plan if you've been meeting your, not in the system of support if you've been meeting your goals, in internal action if it is your first year not meeting those goals, or in year 1 if this is the second consecutive year that your LEA has not met those goals. Any questions on that? I know it is a convoluted process given the way that it's worded in goal that we in code that we have to do the 2 consecutive years. Okay. With that, we are going to give you another brief break because we know we have thrown tremendous amounts of information at you this morning. You all are troopers for hanging in there with us. We are going to take a 10-minute break and then we will come back and talk a little bit about the training options, some reminders and resources, and then we will give you some team time to work on your plan and ask any questions. So it is 11:13 now. We would like to see you back here at 11:23 so that we can continue on and hopefully give you plenty of time to work with your teams. So we will see everyone back here at 11:23.
All right, it is 11:23 and we just have a few quick things to go over before we start the team time. So we are going to go ahead and talk about just a couple of things that are going on this summer as far as training options. And then we'll go into some reminders and resources. And then the rest of the time that we have, we'll stay on and you could work with teams and we'll be here to help answer any questions. So the first thing that we wanted to just kind of give you some information about, we know that this has gone out to assessment directors, probably started back in March, and they are still sending updates and things like that. So we just wanted to just add it here for all of you that our assessment team is doing multiple, they're doing multiple trainings throughout the summer for ALO and ADM when it comes to math. ALO for reading and math, and then ADM for math. And so we have gone through and just pulled some upcoming trainings that they have. And then we also have from they've put together a whole document. Denise just dropped it into the chat box as far as this whole list of trainings that they're doing, and then you could click on the Midas number and quickly find it. So the first one I just noticed is already done with. We had that on for last week and didn't even realize it. So that one's done with, but they're doing many more. So so this one here, this is just in person. And so they've got some coming up in August at USBE. And then we've also, on each slide, we're just going to quickly just click through them, but you'll see that there's the Midas numbers. Search for them and find them and sign up for the date that you would like to do. So then there's some online trainings, and it describes on each slide what is happening at each training. So depending on what you need to do or what training needs to happen with people in your LEA, that will help you see what you need to be looking at. And this one for Acadience Reading, they have some coming up for that. And then this one, this is for new assessors. So they've asked us to stress that if you have new staff that are going to be administering the Acadience Reading, Acadience Math testing, they must complete the new assessor training as well. So they have some multiple dates and times for these. So if you have some new people joining into your LEA that are going to be doing the testing, please make sure that they're getting signed up to do these trainings. They cannot administer the test without the training. So we have some dates coming up for that you'll want to look at. And then there's some focused on math. And there's some more. And this one, there's the new assessors for math as well. So there's some dates coming up for that. And then math paper pencil, there's some information for that one. And then we just wanted to give you our assessment contact. So if you have questions about Acadience Reading and the trainings, that is Teresa McIntyre. And then questions about Acadience Math and trainings, that's Jared Wright. We do not do a lot with the platforms on our end. We look at the data and help support you in calculating data. But as far as knowing all of the ins and outs of the program, of the platforms, that is our assessment team. You may see us at some of these trainings throughout the summer because, especially with literacy moving to ALO, we need to learn a lot of the things too because we don't know them. But please know if you have specific questions about the platforms, it is our assessment team to contact. If you have questions about the upcoming trainings, that would be our assessment team as well. So that slide includes their contacts for easy access. And then just a couple of reminders and resources as far as literacy. So next week, we are hosting the Literacy Best Practice Symposium. There are just a couple of spots still open. So if this is something that you've been thinking about, you might want to get on there sooner than later. I've still kept it on here because there's just a couple of spots that are still open. And then it will be closed. It is next Tuesday from 9 to 4 at the Cotton Heights Community Center. There is the Midas course number for you to click on, and you can get right in there. If you have any questions about this, Julie is our contact. So there is her email information right there on the slide. It's going to be a great event. We have some of our LEAs that are coming to talk about some of the things that they have done that have changed their outcomes. We have some people from our reading panel that will be, we just have a lot of different great information that's going to be shared at this best practice symposium. Oh, so now somebody said it is closed. So that means the last few spots got filled up all of a sudden because there's just a couple of spots. So if it's closed, that means that it is full. You could still reach out to Katie. I don't know. The capacity is based off of what the Cottonwood Heights Community Center told us we could have. So there may not be anything to do unless somebody decides they don't want to go from then, but it is, if it's saying it's closed now, it's because it is full. But you might just keep your eye on it just in case somebody decides they can't make it, because it might open up a spot. And then the next thing we shared this at our March LD meeting with our literacy directors and designees. So we just wanted to just get these dates out there again. This is for our 2024 literacy director meetings, the 4 dates throughout the year. All meetings will be from 9 to 12. Plan on a virtual option and an in-person option, unless something happens with construction in Basement West again or something like that. But our goal is to have an in-person and virtual option at each meeting. And then I'm going to pass it off to Molly so she can talk a little bit about upcoming math leader meetings.
Yes, and we have the flyer for our upcoming SMEC meetings, which is our State Mathematics Education Coordinating Committee meetings for the 2024-2025 school year. I am going to call these tentative meeting dates just because we are having some turnover on our USBE math team. We are hiring a new elementary specialist and a new secondary specialist. So once they onboard this summer, we may be making some tweaks to the structure or schedule, but do hold those dates on your calendar just in case. If you are present in this meeting and you are the math leader or a math leader in your LEA and you do not currently get information from Trish and I about SMEC from our SMEC listserv, please shoot me an email and I can add you to our SMEC elementary listserv to make sure that you are getting communications from us about those meetings and about other professional learning opportunities that are being offered statewide in the math space. Right now, boys, they are tentatively all scheduled to be virtual. That could change as we bring new members onto the team. So I'm going to say virtual for now, TBD if we will be holding in-person meetings or not once we get the new people all spooled up and ready to go. Our next slide has a link if you're in Nearpod, and I will drop the link into the chat about a resource that is likely going to be very helpful to you, especially if you are new to this early learning system. This is our video links document, and if you open it, there are quite a few videos that our broader early learning team has recorded to support you throughout the year, both as you're making this plan and as you're reflecting on your progress. It has videos for all three, now I'm questioning myself, all of the data platforms, Amplify, ADM, and ALO, 3, on how to pull different reports, on how to analyze your data, on how to pull pathways of progress data for calculating whether or not you are on progress for meeting the state growth goal, because none of the platforms have like a pretty colorful report at the LEA level for pathways. You have to pull a spreadsheet and do some calculations on your own. So we have videos to walk you through how to do that. Videos that walk you through the goal setting process, similar to what I did earlier today. It is a wealth of resources. Do not judge us. We are not professionals behind the camera. They are rough recordings on Zoom, but they are there to help you and support you. And as we said, anytime if you need to hop on a call because you need further support, we are always happy to support our LEAs in that way. And then we just have some contact info, which we know we've shared piecemeal throughout our presentation, but our early learning team on the literacy side and the mathematics side, our emails are all on there. Krista's listed as our professional learning grant program manager. And then we have on the right-hand column, the emails for all of our assessment counterparts at USBE who can help you with contract questions about Acadians or questions about how to use the platform specifically. And then we also have that Utah Grants help desk in case you're having issues trying to upload components for your professional learning grant. So with that, we are wrapping up our direct instruction portion of the program. Thank you all so much for bearing with us for such a long time this morning. We know that this is such a fire hose of information, so we want to give you just a moment to reflect on whether or not you were able to meet our success criteria today of knowing now towards the end of our session how to use your Acadience math and reading data to complete and submit your early learning plan, and how to submit your professional learning grant for your LEA. Hopefully, if you feel like you have the tools you need, and if not, we are here to help you out. We are physically here, virtually here. For just shy of the next hour, we will keep this Zoom room open, and we will go ahead and open up a bunch of breakout rooms, and we will make those self-select breakout rooms so that if your team is virtual and not all together in one room, you will have the opportunity. You can just pick a room and say, our whole team is going to go to room 5, for example, to work on your plan. If you are not going to work on your plan today, that is totally fine. You have our full permission to hop off the call at this point, but we will stay on the call in this main room. We can hop in and out of breakout rooms as needed to answer any questions you have if your team wants to go ahead and get started. And so on this slide, we just have some suggestions for how you might organize this team time, but we also give you full permission after 2.5 hours with us if you need some time to digest. If you are getting hungry because it is almost lunchtime, feel free to do that, but we will be checking the early learning inbox throughout the whole summer. We know that a lot of you tend to like to submit them to us early and get it off your plate, especially if you are in an LEA where you get summertime off. You want that off your plate so that it's not hanging over your head when you come back. And we do generally try to do our very best to provide feedback quickly. Just note, I don't think we've mentioned it today. Technically in code, we do have 3 weeks to review a plan. Know that it's unlikely that we will ever take 3 weeks to give you feedback. We do recognize how valuable your time is and how much effort you're putting into creating these. So we always try to get that feedback quickly. And we encourage you to get them submitted as early as possible so you can check that box and cross it off your list. But I will go ahead and open up those optional breakout rooms for anyone who wants to stay on and use this virtual space to start working on your plan. Those are open now. If you go down to the 3 little dots that say more on the bottom of your screen, you should see an option to join breakout rooms, and you can use that to hop in a room with your team, or you are free to go. And thank you so much for spending time with us this morning. We will send out an email once the recording from today's session has processed with the recording, with a link to the Google folder, and all of those wonderful things. Thank you all so much.